Namaste and a very good evening to all the participants here. We extend a very warm and soulful greetings to all the august audience present here on today's auspicious occasion of 21st February 2022, the Divine Mother's birth anniversary celebrations. We begin this session with a 2-minute invocation. Dear friends, the message for today, the mother's birth anniversary is: there is one divine force which acts in the universe and in the individual and is also beyond the individual and the universe. The mother stands for all three, but she is working here in the body to bring down something not yet expressed in this material world so as to transform life here. It is so that you should regard her as the divine Shakti working here for that purpose. She is that in the body, but in her whole consciousness, she is also identified with all the other aspects of the divine force, Sri Aurobindo. As you all know, Sri Aurobindo Complex Trust, JP Nagar, Bangalore, in collaboration with India Post, has issued the limited edition special cover on Sri Aurobindo on 21st January 2022. You can see it on the screen, to celebrate the 150th birth anniversary. Devotees who are interested, they are available at our front desk. Well, friends, we welcome all of you once again. As a part of Sri Aurobindo's 150th birth anniversary celebrations, we have with us Sri S.S. Lahiri ji, Trustee, Sri Aurobindo Complex Trust. Namaste, Lahiri ji, to give a presentation on Holocaust of the Supreme, Sri Aurobindonian and Scriptural approach. Before I call upon Lahiri ji, let me just introduce him. Lahiri ji is a trustee, Sri Aurobindo Society, JP Nagar branch. He regularly conducts online Savitri classes on Tuesdays from 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon at Sri Aurobindo Society, Alsur Bhavan. He is a regular speaker at various centers and branches on the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. He has served in the Indian Air Force and is a recipient of two Presidential Awards, one from President Venkatraman in 1993 and one from Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam in 2003 for rendering meritorious service to the nation. This program is also being live streamed on YouTube. Those who are not able to view it on Zoom, they can view it on the YouTube. We request all the participants to mute their audio for the talk. Lahiri ji, the floor is yours. Lahiri ji?
Mute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear
right.
you. Yes.
Om Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, Satyamayi, Parame. Today, we will try to find out what is actually meant by the sacrifice by the Supreme, or the Holocaust of the Supreme, as Sri Aurobindo would like to call it, in his Savitri. This particular subject of sacrifice of the Holocaust of the Supreme, we have seen, have been approached perhaps in 2 to 3 different directions. Today we will see in the next 1.5 hours the Sri Aurobindonian approach and what our ancient spiritual texts talk about it. So, can you see the slides, Vaishali? Is the slides visible, Vaishali? Fine.
No,
Lahiri ji.
No, Lahiri ji, it's not visible. Ajit sir.
You have to share the screen.
I think I've done that.
So we got one photo.
I'll once again go off and do it.
But you have opened it before you share the screen. No? You have to keep it open.
Yeah. Just 1 minute.
Yes, we can see it now.
Right? You can see it
Yes.
now?
Yeah, we can see it, but if you can put it on a PPT mode, it will be much larger visibility will be
Still
there.
not in PPT mode, is it?
No, it is there. We can see it, but alongside we can see the other slides also. So you can,
Just a minute.
click on the click on the doubles there.
I'm doing that.
Lahiri ji, it's okay. You can go ahead. I think.
Now it is, I think it is got it now.
Yeah, you can
It's
go
okay?
ahead. Yeah, it's okay. You can go ahead.
So now you got only one slide, isn't it?
No, you can go ahead, Lahiri ji.
So we shall be seeing this particular subject as to how Sri Aurobindonian approach has been and how is that as that of the scriptures. And in the scriptures, we'll see what the Vedas talk about, perhaps a bit of Bhagavad-Gita. And from Sri Aurobindonian language, we'll see the mother and the bit of Savitri. As the subject being what it is, we'll have to, lot of interpolation will be required. So I would request everybody to follow this in that respect. Right. There is something not happening, Vaishali. In the morning when it was tried out, it was okay.
You're not able to move the slides, Lahiri ji.
Yeah, I know. It's just 1 minute.
Yeah, now it's okay. Now it is moving.
Yeah. Right. So, sorry for the mix up here. So we'll see these approaches one by one. As we have seen in our scriptures earlier, the very beginning, when it is announced in the Upanishads, it talks about that existence alone was there in the beginning. And yet another Mahavakya is there, which talks about all this is verily Brahman. Sarvamidam Brahman. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahman. Then Purusha is all this that has been here. And also we find in the process of creation, our Upanishads tell us it saw, and there was a force of consciousness in the gaze, which is tapas, which resulted in the creation. Now this implied that initially a sacrifice or a total Holocaust had to be done. That is how the process began. We have seen in the same fashion in the Chandogya Upanishad, Sat eva samya idam agre asit, ekam eva advitiyam. So on this subject of that there is Sat alone in the beginning, there has been a lot of discussions on the subject earlier. And we had various thoughts of theories coming up. And then in the process, that is how the existence and non-existence came up. The concept of non-existence, which was built into this particular shlokas, were meant to be only to emphasize that there is existence. Sri Aurobindo talks about it in Life Divine very clearly on this. And then in the process we found that it saw and there was a force of consciousness. So why this sacrifice? Why this Holocaust that was required? Because our scriptures tell us that the sacrifice is the best means of achieving whatever one wants to achieve. Obviously, the sacrifices were made for some great gains. And this sacrifice is continuously being done. It is not a thing that has been done and dusted and kept aside. It is continuously being done. And then we ask ourselves, who sacrificed? When was this sacrifice done? And what was the outcome of that sacrifice? These are the questions that we are going to broadly discuss today so that it triggers in us the process of understanding and we get into certain more research, more to find out what else is needed to be done. The two approaches we are taking, one by Sri Aurobindo mentioned in Savitri, where he says there is a Holocaust to the Supreme Mother, and another one is the ancient scriptures say the Holocaust was of the Purusha. Are these two approaches different? Today we are going to see their divergence, their parallelism, and their congruence. So we come to this particular topic, the mother. You know, when Kapali Shastri second time came to Sri Aurobindo Ashram from Ramana Ashram, finally in 1926, that was his second visit. First visit was in 1917. And in 1926, he came finally. And when he came to that place, finally, he asked Sri Aurobindo, who is this mother? And Sri Aurobindo sent him a manuscript form of book where he had written down, who is this mother? It was not published that time. Subsequently, it got published in the name of this book, The Mother, that we read today. And this is that book, this image. And we will quickly go through certain portions and emphasize on certain areas of the sacrifice. He obviously mentioned there that there are 4 powers: Maheshwari, the ever-wise, the Mahakali, the mighty one, Mahalakshmi, who does entire harmony, and Mahasaraswati, who is the goddess of perfection. These powers are for cosmic work. Many of you might find that what type of powers are these? We should remember that these are typal powers. And in Mother Sri Aurobindo says that the four powers of the mother are four of her outstanding personalities, portions and embodiments of her divinity through whom she acts on her creatures, orders and harmonizes the creation. For the mother, who is one, but she comes before us with the differing aspects. Sometimes the avatar, sometimes other powers, sometimes the vibhutis. The Supreme Mother is the Chit Shakti. She has three poises that we know: transcendental, universal, and individual. The one original transcendent Shakti, the Mother, stands above all the worlds and bears in her eternal consciousness the Supreme Divine. In our message today that Vaishali read out in the beginning, we all got this thing restated by the Mother. There are other great personalities of the Divine Mother, but they were more difficult to bring down. This is the most pertinent point. This is the most pertinent point that we must know, that these four powers came down, yes, but there are other powers which are very difficult to be brought down. And that did not happen at that time. The Mother not only governs all from above, but she descends into this lesser triple universe. She is here both impersonally and also personally. Impersonally, our movement in ignorance is a movement by her impersonality. And there are many other such examples. Personally, of course, she's there with each and every one. Para Prakriti Jiva Bhuta. We have read that. So if we put them in a particular hierarchy, and that this hierarchy is a mental creation, it is not a hierarchy of this nature, we have this kind of a hierarchy. And we have the Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati. These are the typal powers, those who are below the supramental Mahashakti, but are closest to us. This is the beauty of these four powers. So we find that we have the cosmic power, which are typal, and these are wisdom, knowledge, strength, power, harmony of mutuality, and perfection and service. Corresponding to that, we have the soul qualities, are Maheshwaris, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. So we see that this cosmic power and the soul qualities, they are going parallel to each other, corresponding to each other. They're not diverse from each other. We now go to Savitri and see what we can draw from the mother and blend it into Savitri, and what finally Savitri comes out to tell us on this matter. Savitri, as you know, is the biggest, largest epic in English language. And as in the mother, so in Savitri, we find Sri Aurobindo has emphasized on the aspect of sacrifice by the mother. So let us visit Savitri and see what is there. Sri Aurobindo writes in other power, our life is a holocaust of the Supreme. The great world mother, by her sacrifice, has made her soul the body of our state. We have seen that Sri Aurobindo had stated in this book, in the book, The Mother, while dealing with the four aspects, that he has written there, this is the great sacrifice called sometimes the sacrifice of the Purusha. But much more deeply, the Holocaust of Prakriti, the sacrifice of the Divine Mother. This is the subject we are trying to handle. Is it the sacrifice of Purusha or is it the sacrifice of Prakriti? And does it really matter whether it is a Purusha or Prakriti? We also have to know, as we study this subject, both the mother, both Savitri and Purusha Shukta and any subject, wherever sacrifice is being done. And mind you, there is not one time, one sacrifice that has been done. Many sacrifices have been done. Many sacrifices have been done. We have to also identify and know, has this sacrifice been made during the involution period or is it done during the evolution period? What was the context in which these have been done? That too is to be kept in mind and studied. In the Mother, Sri Aurobindo says, there are great personalities of Divine Mother, but they were more difficult to be brought down. Among them, the most of all, who is her personality of that mysterious and powerful ecstasy and ananda, which flows from a supreme divine love. The ananda that alone can heal the gulf. Again, he states, only when the four have founded their harmony and freedom of movement in the transformed mind of life and body, can these other rare powers manifest. So the rare powers can only manifest if and only if the previous powers have been in place and are in harmony. And that is why we see these lines in Savitri also, that only when the paces are ready, she told Savitri that I will come down. And this also suggests that the harmony that was till then achieved was obviously not adequate and still much more was needed. It is here that the yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother expressed in the epic Savitri through the yoga of King Ashwapati and of Savitri seems to come in. And what is the aim of, sorry for the spelling mistake there, the aim of the sacrifice has been, the mission is that the mind layer had to be expanded so that the supramental descent and the ascent becomes possible. It is not only a descent, but also it has got to be an ascent upwards that has to be made possible. Only then, from across the path of the divine event, the mind of night can be removed and mind of light can be ushered in. So the problem lies in purifying what we already have here. And this is a tremendous task. And this is where the Savitri awoke among the tribes to do the necessary job. And once in the vigil of the deathless gaze, Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, these grades had marked a giant downward plunge the wide and prone leap of Godhead's fall. You see, very clearly he has said that the downward descent, which was a sacrifice, was made, in fact, was indeed made. So the incarnation of Savitri had happened, and the decision was made by her after meeting Satyavan in the forest. It is to initiate the process that the Naradas decided to visit the palace of King Ashwapati at a most befitting moment. Why the most befitting moment? Because that is the time the decision had to be taken as to whether she goes along with Satyavan or she does not go along. Knowing fully well, it was a moment that was just ahead of the 12 swift-wing months, because Satyavan was to die after a year of the marriage. Savitri gets wedded to Satyavan, and in the course of her yoga, received the command to do the yoga to conquer the death. And she was told, "Arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death." But she is an individual, and death is universal. Can she do it? Is she adequately equipped to do it? Therefore, she needed still higher powers, and the help was imperative. She could not have done that alone. This highest power is the power of supreme love, and it is this power that can conquer death. So, Savitri decides to enter into that abode of this power and become supramentalized. Savitri herself thereby embodies the power of the transcendental, and she can now do it. She, in fact, does the needed sacrifice and ascends to accomplish this particular task. And once supramentalized, she removes her veil of the Supreme Mother that she is. She stands in front of the death and the death gets vanquished. Death gets vanquished. Anything?
Yeah, Lahiri ji, your slides are moving.
Slides are
right?
not moving, Lahiri ji.
You are still on the first slide which you showed us.
How come? I mean, I just log out. I wish you had told me this. Right. I'm leaving and again rejoining.
Okay.
Vaishali, you have disabled me in the slide sharing.
Yes, sir. 1 minute, sir.
Yeah,
1
Vaishali,
minute.
Yes, sir.
Puneet,
Yes, sir. 1 minute.
yeah,
Okay,
Puneet,
sir.
I think
Now you
you
can
have.
see.
Yes.
You have disabled me.
No, sir. Now you can.
Now it is clear. Sorry.
Can you see the slides?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Are you seeing the change?
Yes,
No,
sir.
Yes.
it is changing.
It is changing. Now you can move.
I think that was the point.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So what happened is Savitri then
Hmm.
could vanquish the death, and transfigured was that particular shape. So here in Savitri, the supreme power sanctions the ardent appeal coming from below. And so we find nature shall live to manifest the secret God. The spirit shall take up the human play. The earthly life became the life divine. And an everlasting day, therefore, Sri Aurobindo says, awaits us at the end of our journey. Now we want to check and find out, what does our scriptures tell us? Is there a similarity? Is there a common thread that runs through the various concepts of sacrifice in the divine, in our scriptures also? And how they differ? Do they differ from that of what integral yoga has told us? Let us now go back in time and look into our Vedas. In the Veda, we have the famous Purusha Shukta, which is perhaps the most popular of all the Shuktas, that is found in almost all the Vedas, all the 4 Vedas, and many Upanishads also do bring out these aspects in their slokas. So in Purusha Shukta, there are quite a few slokas, about 17 to 18 slokas. Various books gives various numbers of slokas. We are going to pick up 4 to 5 of them only and see what they are talking in Purusha Shukta. There are Sanskrit slokas here. Those who are not conversant with it may read the English portion below that. I have given the Sanskrit portion only because it is useful. Now, Sri Aurobindo has termed Purusha Shukta as a profound composition, a terminology you will not find very easily granted by Sri Aurobindo. It's a profound composition, he says. Very short Shukta of 17, 18 slokas, but then mantras, but then it is very profound, very profound. The importance of Purusha Shukta cannot be overstressed, as I said. Besides Vedas and Aranyaks, some Upanishads contain some of the mantras of Purusha Shukta verbatim. And especially we'll find its reflection and reverberations in Setrashata Upanishad also. The Sukta is highly packed with intuitive suggestions, and that illuminates the reader. Let us just see a few slokas, as I said. First one is Sahasra Sesha Purusha, Sahasraksha, Sahasrapat, Sabhuvin Vishwatam Pruta, Attatishta Dasangulam. He says the Purusha has numerous heads, numerous eyes and feet. He pervades the earth on all sides. He exists beyond the 10 directions. And mantra number 2 says, very interestingly, it says, that Purusha indeed is all this that has been and what is to come. He is the Lord of immortality. He, the Lord of immortality, rises from the plane of matter. So, the English version of this particular first line you saw in the second slides in the beginning. Purusha evadam sarvam jat bhutam jatcha bhavyam. Then going to fifth sloka, which is very important and most debated and most discussed all over, is Tasmad Viraja Jayate Viraja Adhipurusha. So from him was Virat born, and from Virat was born the Purusha. So there is two transitions that has taken place that has been brought out. So this Viraja is what we call Hiranyagarbha. And having born, he is spread out all over. And then in the sixth he says, Jat Purushena Havisha Deva Jagyam Antabat, with Purusha as offering, the Devas perform the sacrifice. And spring was the Ajyam, Basanta Asha Asid Ajyam, Grishma Idham, Sharad Avihi. So the spring was the Ajyam, summer was the fuel, and autumn was the offering. Now this is extremely packed. So here you see the Purusha himself has been the offering. He himself has been offered in the fire of the Yajna Kunda. And that is why this is called Sarvabhuta Yajna. Everything is sacrificed. He himself has been sacrificed. And then comes this sloka, which says in the mantra number 12, that he says the mouth was the man of the word, that means the Brahmin, and into the prince his arms were made, while his thighs became the producer, his powers of movement gave birth to the man of service. That means Brahmin, then the warrior and the Vaishya and the Shudras are out of these parts of the body. Now these are wrongly interpreted by various people. That's a separate issue we will not visit. Is okay, Ajit? Is the slides moving?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Right. So this Yajna was called Sarvabhuta, the offering of all. The act of creation itself grew out of this Yajna. The rite of sacrifice. Who was worshipped at this sacrifice? It was the Purusha. Who performed it? Brahma, the creative aspect of the Purusha. Who was the fire? Purusha's heart was the fire. What was sacrificed? Again, the Purusha himself was sacrificed. And so, this particular sloka, which is numbered 16 somewhere and 17 somewhere else and 18 in some other version, this is another wonderful sloka. It says, by sacrifice, God sacrificed to sacrifice. So sacrifice was sacrifice to sacrifice. This is the import of it, because at that time that was the sacrifice. Now the birth of the Viraja that we talked about in the fifth sloka earlier, the Purusha, the sacrifice of the cosmic Purusha has been done, and thereby came the Viraj. From Viraj arose the terrestrial beings and things. Anything that came up came out of Viraj. The four aspects of power that we find in the mother in the form of Chaturvarna created the smooth functioning of the social system. Now, this was essential power or spiritual principle of self-becoming. Svabhava. And this power loses forth into the universal action of karma. So activities and action flow out of this Svabhava. This sacrifice is the mechanism that started the process. The Purusha himself sacrifices himself, and consequently the terrestrial world of things and beings are created. Not only terrestrial, even the Devas were created. Agni, Indra, Vayu came out of that. This yajna was willed by God. Who willed it? It was willed by God. It was not the divine will. It was willed by the rishis. It was willed by the sadhyas. It is willed by the devas. It was not a divine will. So we need to, these are the facets we need to distinguish when we read the mother, when we read the Savitri, and when we read our scriptures. Out of the total sacrifice, that means dismemberment of the Purusha, that was offered into the Kunda, the four qualities came out. And we have Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishya, and Sudra as a social system of functioning. We find that Purusha Shukta is actually dealing with the cosmic being and not a transcendental being. Now here comes a problem. This is yet another place where we need to cross over and tactfully cross over. Purusha Shukta is dealing with a cosmic being and not the transcendental. This all and we know that death, Yama, is a universal being, not a transcendental. So obviously, this was not adequate. This was not adequate to sort out the problems of the terrestrial world that was left after the creation of them. So this also shows us that it is the initiation stage of the manifestation. And why wasn't it needed? Sri Aurobindo has said in his writings, God becomes greater by the fall. And that fall is through sacrifice. So now we have widened our further from the 2 columns to 3rd column we have come. The soul qualities have been broadly defined here as Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, as in the Purusha Shukta. For a short while, let us visit the Chaturvarna concept of the Bhagavad-Gita, yet another great scriptures that we have in our hand. 4.13 of Bhagavad-Gita says, Chaturvarna maya srishtam guna karma vibhagas. So the parallelism between the Bhagavad-Gita and the divisions of the Purusha Shukta is extremely striking. Extremely striking. We need to take this into consideration. In the essays of the Gita, we find each jiva possesses in his spiritual nature, these 4 sides: a soul of knowledge, soul of strength, a power of mutuality and interchange, a soul of works and service. So each one of us must have all these 4 qualities. I cannot be a Brahmin by not becoming a Kshatriya or Shudra or Vaishya. I have to equally develop all these qualities in me. Then only I am becoming more complete. The Svabhava then follows, not crudely and rigidly, as has been put out in our social demarcations over the years, but subtly and flexibly, the law of this train and develops in developing it in the other 3 powers. So the 4 cosmic powers and the 4 soul powers indeed work in consonance. But more sacrifices were needed. as we saw in the mother book, to infuse love into matter. And this was done by Savitri. And what mother says, the divine has sacrificed himself in matter. Mark the word himself. The divine has sacrificed himself in matter. She did not use the word herself. The divine has sacrificed himself in matter to awaken the consciousness in matter, which justifies the sacrifice of matter to divine. It is a mutual reciprocal sacrifice. And this is the great secret of the Gita. Mother says so. Matter must sacrifice itself to the divine automatically, even unconsciously, whether one wants it or not. This is what happens. So mother says this elsewhere, but actually matter is too weak to make a demanding sacrifice. Because Sri Aurobindo has said, we must sacrifice appropriately, an acceptable sacrifice. Sacrifice has to be acceptable sacrifice. And can matter do an acceptable sacrifice? Mother says, matter needs some help. To offer itself, matter to offer itself to the divine in its measure and in proportion. Somebody has to do it for it. It is the Divine Mother as incarnate Savitri who does the yoga of surrender to the Supreme, and it is she who identifies her will with the capital will of the Supreme to kindle divine sacrifice in the heart and soul of matter. So, when the matter rises and becomes divine. Sri Aurobindo writes, the cycles of evolution or new formulations, evolution is new formulations, tend always upwards. But they are cycles that do not ascend in a straight line. The process therefore gives the impression of a series of ascents and descents. But what is essential in the gain of the evolution is kept, or even if eclipsed for a time, re-emerges in new forms suitable to the new age. Because the new age will demand a new containers, new Aadhaar, and these new Aadhars have to be built to keep pace with the adventure of consciousness. The creation has descended all the degrees of it being from the supermind to matter, and in each degree it has created a world, rain, plane, or order proper to that degree. In creating of the material world, there was a plunge of this descending consciousness into an apparent inconscience, degree by degree, until it recovers its highest spiritual and supramental summit and manifests their power here in matter. So the ascent has to take place to urge that the supreme consciousness to come into the matter and resurrect the matter. There is no, Kapali Shastri says that there is no creation without the all-powerful consciousness of self assuming a spatial and temporal terms of existence. Sat provides the needed support. The Sat Purusha too has to do the sacrifice. Now I find this most tellingly covers the issue that both Purusha and Prakriti has to sacrifice. Because in any case, Purusha and Prakriti are not separate. They are not different. Each are in the other. So the creation is an act in which the Satpurusha and the Shakti are inseparably engaged. And this is a continuous process, as we discussed, that it is not that it is done once and finished with it. Now, we also find, I intend to mention, since we have some time to mention, that mentor of Kapali Shastri and disciple of Ramana Maharshi, Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni, in his famous composition of Uma Shastram in Canto 20, I think sloka number 3, in fact, Canto 20 talks in terms of manifestation of the Divine Mother. The entire Canto 20 is manifestation of the Divine Mother. And in that Canto 20, each sloka is, unbelievably great. But the sloka number 3 is beautiful. And it says how the Divine Mother gets herself to appear, spread into, and make sensible to one who is sensitive in whatever you do. So the sloka says that, just give me 30 seconds. Yeah. He says that when you pray to the Murti, she is in the form. When you sing her glory, she is in the sound. When you think about her, she is in your prana. And tattva vichare, when you do the tattva vichar, he is in sarvagata. He is in everything. In everything means? Hello? Hello? Right.
The slides are not moving.
Pardon?
The slides
No,
are
I have not.
moving.
I have not moved the slide.
Okay.
I have not moved the slide. So he says, Archana Kale Rupa Gata. When you're doing Archana, he has moved into the Rupa of which you are doing the Archana. And Santuti Kale Sabda Gata. When you are praising, singing her chants, she is in Sabda, in the sound waves. Chintana Kale Pranagata. When you are thinking about him, thinking about her, she is in the prana. And Tattva Vichare Sarvagata. Like this, there are many slokas in the Uma Shastram. It is, so we find that between this analytical mind of Kapali Shastri and that of Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni, they have given us an idea that how this has been actually bridged. It is not only that these two have done, there are many writings which have seen that, we have come across, like what is called Idam Bhava and Aham Bhava of one Vedantic thought. So, to summarize all this, Sri Aurobindo, we need to read out something I have got here. This is something what Sri Aurobindo wrote to one of the disciples in 1934. 1934. Remember the year. This letter states, and I'm reading out from one of the writings, that behind the appearance of the universe, there is a reality of a being and consciousness, a self of all things, one and eternal. All beings are united in that one self and spirit, but divided in certain separative consciousness and ignorance of their true self and reality in the mind, life, and body. It is possible to remove this veil of separative consciousness and become aware of the true self, the divinity within us and within all. This one being and consciousness is involved here in matter. Evolution is the method by which it liberates itself. Consciousness appears in what seems to be inconscient, and once having appeared in self implied to grow higher and higher, and at the same time to enlarge and develop towards a greater and greater perfection. All this needs sacrifice. Life is the first step of this release of consciousness. Mind is second, and the evolution does not finish with mind. It awaits the release of something greater. The next step of evolution must be towards development of supermind and spirit. Only when will the involved divinity in things release itself entirely, and it becomes possible for the life to manifest perfection, then things will move. The former step in evolutions were taken by nature without a conscious will. But in man, nature becomes able to evolve by a conscious will. It is not, however, by the mental will in man that this can be wholly done. This is the impediment. And that is why mind of light is needed to replace mind of night. A conversion has to be made, a turning of the consciousness by which mind has to change into higher principles. Thus, the integral yoga teaches that a descent of the higher principle is possible, which will do two things: not merely release the spiritual self out of the world, but release it in the world. Replace the mind's ignorance or its very limited knowledge of a supramental truth, truth consciousness with chit, which will be sufficient instrument of the inner self and make it possible for the human being to find himself dynamically as well as inwardly and grow out of his still animal humanity to a divine awareness. And thus shall earth open up to divinity. So thus only an integral approach harmonizes the two seemingly separate approaches, and thus shall earth open up to divinity and a new creation will come. With this, I come to the close of my presentation.
Now the floor is open to question and answer session. Please unmute yourself and ask the question. Any questions? Anyone? Thank you very much, Lahiri ji, for this great and wonderful presentation of Holocaust of the Supreme. You have described this topic through the Mother Savitri book by Sri Aurobindo and the various ancient scriptures. We look forward to hear from you again. Don't escape us. Okay. And we have been greatly benefited by this session. Our next webinar program will be on 26th February, this Saturday, by Shekhar and Shweta of Sri Aurobindo Society, Puducherry, on Towards Self-Perfection, Yoga for Digestion. From 4 to 5:30 p.m. All are welcome. Before we close this session, these few lines from the mother, which beautifully describe the depth we owe to the divine for this life beautiful. All your life must be an offering and a sacrifice to the Supreme. Your only object in action shall be to serve, to receive, to fulfill, to become a manifesting instrument of the divine Shakti in her works. You must grow in the divine consciousness till there is no difference between your will and hers. No motive except her impulsion in you. No action that is not her conscious action in you and through you. Let our life be a constant prayer to the divine. We shall close this session with 1 minute silence. Thank you all, and we meet again for the next webinar session. Thank you, Lahiri once
Thank
again.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Lahiri.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lahiri ji, thank you.